People do a lot of dumb stuff in high school to look cool, don't they? I wore Jinko jeans and these big Reebok pump shoes, and I would pick my hair out with an afro pick because I had this big red Jew curl, basically. I did a lot of weird stuff to look cool, but probably the weirdest thing I ever did was I memorized 6 minutes of the epic rap song Rapper's Delight by Sugar Hill Gang from the 80s. Does anybody remember that song? It's the one that starts with like a hip, hop, a hippie to the hip. That's right. You know. So I memorized that song in hopes of one day being able to like bust it out in high school, maybe at a dance or at a friend's party or something like that. And of course, that opportunity never came, because why would it? Why would you rap? I was like 120 pounds wet in like suburban America. Why would I know that song? I don't know. I did. I loved it. And for years, I never really got to show off my rhyming skills because no opportunity came in high school. And then in college, again, no opportunity came because why would it? Why would Rapper's Delight ever be around again? And so I had this song, just this worthless thing of information. I could not forget it. Like it was just whatever I did to memorize that song, I should remember how to do it because it was like the best memorizing technique of all time. But all that changed 2 months ago. When if you know my wife, her name's Stephanie, she is a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines, and she just finished a 5-week training. I flew out to Dallas to visit her. It was great. And on our way back to BWI, we got stuck in the Houston airport because this vicious hailstorm came in and set us up for a 5-hour layover, which is a long time to be in this small airport. So we're there hanging out, and we're getting ready to just kind of realize, all right, who's around us, who's going to be on this flight, and we realized this predominantly African-American church choir is there from Washington, D.C., and they're coming from a conference, and they're trying to fly into BWI, and so we're all kind of there hanging out, everything's fine. After hour 1, okay, it's obnoxious, but whatever, it's just annoying that we have to be there waiting. Then, after hour 2, we all get a little restless, but then in hour 3, this church choir just starts busting out songs, like just hymns and songs and clapping, and it was ruckus. And I wish you could have been there, but you weren't. So here's some videotape of what happened. It was awesome. And then it turned into like this karaoke thing. It was weird. Yeah. Look at this guy. Oh, yeah. Dude, it was so fun. They shut down the airport. Everyone was going to watch. And then after like an hour of this, they just start picking people who are watching and forcing them to come perform in front of everyone, regardless of whether or not they had any talent. And so there I am standing behind this wall with my wife wearing like my college t-shirt and like these thick frame glasses I got back in high school. And this woman just points at me. And like my gut, it was awful. I was like, oh no. But then I remembered Rapper's Delight. And here's what happened. All right, that's it. That's all I get. Thank you. I'm coming for you, Justin Timberlake. I'm coming. But it was absolutely awesome. We were there for a couple hours. It was the best layover we've ever had. Southwest actually gave a $100 Visa gift card to 7 of the women in that choir for entertaining everybody. It was outrageous. It was so fun. And I tell you that story, 1, because it was awesome, and 2, because I want to talk about this morning this idea of pouring into something that maybe won't benefit you immediately, but it makes you better in the long haul. Like I memorized that song thinking it would help me. Ultimately it did, because that's one memory I'll never forget. But I want to talk about this idea of pouring into things now that may not be convenient, but in the long run, we're better for it. And as you know, we're continuing this series Between the Lines, where we look at parables of Jesus this morning, or it's just another way of saying stories that Jesus told to communicate greater truths to us. But specifically, we're going to look into a story that he told about a tree, its fruit, and when it comes to knowing God and just this idea of having a relationship with him, why it's pouring into the roots of our relationship that will ultimately produce, I think, what we all want out of life. And also a secondary aspect of it, that we can withstand the storms of life because we're rooted. So we're going to look into Luke chapter 13, verses 6 through 9. They're going to be up on the screens. And I just want to get right into it, so let's do it. Luke 13 says, "Then Jesus told this story. A man planted a fig tree in his garden and came again and again to see if there's any fruit on it. But he was always disappointed. Finally, he said to his gardener, 'I've waited 3 years and there hasn't been a single fig. Cut it down. It's taking up space we can use for something else.' The gardener answered, 'Give it one more chance. Leave it another year and I'll give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer. If we get figs next year, fine. If not, you can cut it down.'" So just a side note, after reading this, something I learned while I was preparing for this message today, and I was studying from a lot of scholarly guys who just knew this stuff, I found out that Jesus, when he mentions fig trees, he's actually talking about the nation of Israel, which I thought was cool. He's actually talking about the Jewish culture of that day. And whenever Jesus talks about fig trees, there's even a deeper subtext to what he's communicating because he's talking about the Jewish nation, and there's a whole lot of other things that can come from that, which I thought was really cool. So that's just a side note. But the one thing I want to get really into today is mainly what the gardener says to the tree owner. So let's summarize the story real quick. There's a dude, he's got a tree, and it stinks. It's not producing anything. So then he's like, "I'm going to cut it down. It doesn't do anything." And the gardener's like, no, give it one more chance. I'm going to use plenty of fertilizer. I'll use special attention to it. Just give it one more year, and if it produces fruit, then we're good. And that's the end of the story. We don't find out what happened to the tree. That's just the end of it. But like I said before, I think there's something in the gardener's response here that Jesus is trying to communicate to us 2,000 years after he told this story. And I think the two main points we draw from what Jesus says in this story about the gardener's response, there's two of them. One of them being, Jesus desires for you to have a full and fruitful life. I think he wants that for you. He wants you to have a full and fruitful life. And the second one is that the way to experience a full and fruitful life is to pour into the roots of our relationship with God. When you read the Bible, you see that Jesus uses trees as an analogy for people and their relationship with God all the time. In Matthew 7, verse 20, it says, "Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions." And then Jesus does it again in Luke 6. He basically says that a good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit, and that the tree is identified by its fruit. He just reinforces this other passage. And not surprisingly, Jesus uses this imagery to paint a picture of our own lives and our own relationships with God through the parable in this Luke 13 scripture. We read the story, and I believe that the first thing you draw from it is just the reality that God wants there to be fruit. He wants you to have a fruitful life. And I don't want us to get it twisted. I don't want us to think that when I say fruit, I'm talking about anything worldly, really. Like when I say that Jesus wants you to have a full, fruitful life, he's not talking about you having a great car. He's not talking about you having a great job. He's not even talking about you having a great marriage. I think he wants you to experience a great marriage and have fulfillment from your profession, but that's not what he's talking about here, I don't think. Because the Bible says in Galatians 5, verse 22, that the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit of knowing God and being connected with him, is that the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And here's the thing about those fruit. They're things that everybody wants, regardless of where they're at. No matter where you are, if you have everything the world has to offer, if you don't have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, what is there? And likewise, you go to other countries and they don't have anything, but they have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. Those are the things that are satisfying, and those are the things that bring fullness of life. In the parable, we see the tree's owner isn't satisfied with a tree that doesn't produce fruit. And I would argue, too, for us, we shouldn't be satisfied when our lives aren't producing fruit, when we don't have love and joy and peace in our lives. Because what kind of life is that? But here's the thing. Those things that we want, the fruit that we're talking about, you can't just work hard to get them. Think about a tree. A tree doesn't work hard. It doesn't sweat to produce these things. It just does because of their roots. And that brings us to the second point, one that I want to primarily focus on today. And it's the idea that in order to bear fruit in our lives, and in order to have a full life that Jesus desires for us, that we have to pour into the roots of our relationship with God and add depth to our relationship with God. Remember when you guys went to college and people would tell you, don't room with your best friend because you'll end up hating each other by like October? I remember someone telling me that, saying, hey, don't be roommates with your best friend because you'll kill each other. It'll just ruin your friendship. And I think that can kind of be true when you go away on vacation with a bunch of friends. Like if you go away for a week with someone, eventually they'll start to see the things that you don't want anyone else to see. And it gets awkward. I got to go away to Florida with the Mosaic staff for a conference, and it was great. It was a wonderful time. But the unfortunate event that happened was I realized that sometimes I have a tendency to turn into Andy Bernard from The Office. And I don't mean like I say "rid-it-dit-do" all the time. What I mean is like I remind people of things that I did. Like he reminds people that he went to Cornell. He's just a stuck-up guy from the show if you don't watch it. But when I was down there, people would say, hey, where should we go for lunch today? And I lived in Florida for a year, and so naturally I would say, oh, we can go here, and they have this, and we can go here, and they have this, and this place will be jumping. We should go there, because I lived here. I would say that all the time, because I lived here. And after a while, Ben and Carl so kindly pointed out to me that I was doing it all the time, and so Carl would say, oh, hey, man, that's great. How'd you know that? Did you live here? And because of that, I realized, I'm just reminding everybody all the time of what I did. And it got kind of obnoxious. So I tell you that story because if you are going to Florida, you should call me because I know where everything is. No, I tell you that story because I did live in Florida, and there is a truth that I learned down there about palm trees that I think specifically speaks to what we're talking about today with this idea of pouring into the roots. As you know, anyone who's ever been to Florida knows there's a lot of palm trees. It's great. It's one of the cool parts about Florida. There's just palm trees everywhere. But I learned while I lived there that they're kind of complicated trees. You get them, and they're kind of there, and they're not huge, but you plant them in the soil, and you get these brown stakes, and they prop them up. So let's say you've got a palm tree in your front yard. And then the palm tree starts to grow, and it looks fine. It looks green. It looks healthy. The branches are growing. Everything's fine. But then over time, it just starts to get brown and ugly. And you don't know why, and so some people just get rid of the palm tree and put in like a pink flamingo or something, because it's Florida. But what you would do if you were smart is you would go down to Home Depot or you go down to Lowe's, find a specialist, and say, hey man, I got a problem with my palm tree. And before you say anything else, the specialist would tell you, it's dying, right? And you'd be like, what's this guy psychic? Like, what's going on? And the reality is that palm trees, that happens all the time. Palm trees will grow and look healthy, and then all of a sudden, they'll get kind of mangy and gross. And people think that they're dying. But the specialist would tell you that palm trees aren't that complicated. They've got roots and they got branches. If the branches get bigger than the roots, it dies. But if the roots are bigger than the branches, you're fine. And so what he would say is that if your tree is dying, he would actually encourage you to cut off all the branches, even the healthy ones, and then take a boatload of salt and pour it all over the roots for a couple weeks. And that's how you would save the tree. And the reason that's so important is because in Florida, as you know, hurricanes are brutal. And if a tree with all these branches but no roots comes, if a storm comes, it's just going to rip that palm tree out. It's got no shot of withstanding the storm. And when you hear that story, I know that naturally we all think about, okay, he's telling us the roots are the most important part. But if we continue down that path and how it translates to this parable that Jesus tells us, we see that in the gardener's response, his answer is basically, hey, in order to make this tree fruitful, I'm going to pour into the roots. I'm going to lay plenty of fertilizer. I'm going to take care of the roots. And if we know that Jesus in his parables talks about people as trees, and he uses trees as images for our own relationship with God, and we know that the roots are essential, I think the natural questions that arise are, one, what the heck does it mean to have roots in our relationship with God? And how do I grow them? And I think the answer to that question is a term called spiritual discipline. It's an academic term. It sounds academic at least, and it sounds kind of heady, but it's actually a pretty simple concept on paper. It's the idea of executing discipline-like studies or actions that eventually lead us to health and growth over time. Things we're not necessarily drawn to for a variety of reasons, but they're things that over time make us better, not just as people, but better rooted in God. And real quick, I think a good question to ask is when I talk about spiritual discipline, and I use the word deep, and I talk about depth in our relationship with God, I think a good question to ask is, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be deep? What does it mean to have depth in your relationship with God? And I thought about that a lot. And I think the answer is kind of like the exact same thing when you have a deep relationship with a friend. The things that are consistent when you have a deep relationship with God is that you go to him in authenticity, you go to him honestly, and you go to him often. Because I know my closest friends, when I get together with them, we hang out often, and we hang out and we're honest with each other, and we're real with each other. And so when I talk about depth in your relationship with God, I'm not talking about this heady, academic, intellectual thing. I'm talking about honesty and going often with God. I think it means that we're spending time with God in a moment where it's just you and him, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But with this term spiritual discipline, I want to clarify this too. I'm not talking about hurting yourself. Sometimes you hear the word discipline and it means inflicting pain or something like that. I'm not talking about that. What I mean is pursuing environments in your daily life that may be unnatural at first, where it's just you and God. Those environments where growth can occur. Because when you're planting a tree or a flower, you say you plant a flower, you aren't growing anything. You're just creating environment for growth to occur, and that's all spiritual discipline is. When we have spiritual discipline in our relationship with God, we're doing things that aren't natural to our everyday lives, but we're trusting God and knowing that in the end they're going to make us better. I know that rap song was a loose connection, but I memorized that song hoping that one day it would benefit me. But there are things in our lives that we can do starting today that could literally change your life and how you see God and how you relate to him. But over time, it'll produce the fruit you want. Before we continue, I want to address a main point that serves as a catalyst for everything else we're going to look at this morning, and when it comes to adding depth in our relationship with God. And it's this. Just like the underground roots of a tree are unseen, but they're the things that produce the health of a tree, in our lives today, the things no one sees produce what everybody wants. The things no one sees produce what everyone wants. When I look at my own life or the life of others, when they're producing fruit and I'm seeing them on their spiritual journey, wherever they're at, and they're just producing fruit, I see the love and the joy and the peace. A major consistency when I see them is that they're pouring into the relationships of their relationship with God in the private and intimate parts of their lives. They pour into the areas of their relationship with God that no one sees except him. And because I think the roots of our relationship with God are in the deep parts of ourselves that is only us and God, I know that I'm naturally less inclined to pursue them because I don't get any public recognition for pursuing them. You don't get any accolade for spending time with God one-on-one. No one sees that. I know for me, I'm less inclined to pursue that, and I think that's the same for a lot of America. But I believe that when Jesus talks about the gardener revitalizing the life of the fig tree, or any other parable where he talks about trees bearing fruit, it's the roots that he's preoccupied with. The private aspects of your relationship with God that ultimately produce a full life. By pouring into the things that no one else sees but God, that's how you get what everyone wants. So I think the roots of having a relationship with God means pouring into the unseen parts of our lives. And I think that answers what is the root of having a relationship with God, but it doesn't answer how you grow it. And that's what I want to talk about more. What does it look like to grow your roots? What does it look like to, okay, you sold me, I want to have one-on-one time with God, but what does that look like? And that's where this term spiritual discipline specifically comes into play. So I want to list a couple things that you could do. If you're taking notes, I would encourage you to jot down a couple things here, because these are the things that you'll be able to do spiritual discipline in your life to pour into the roots of your relationship with God. So the first thing is reading and studying the Bible. The number one indicator of whether or not you experience spiritual growth is not listening to a great sermon or experiencing great worship or even going to a great church. Carl has said it before, and I know it's true. The number one indicator of spiritual growth is whether or not you're spending time, daily time, reading your Bible alone. And a simple formula for that, if you want to read the Bible but you just don't know where to start or you don't know how, a simple acronym for reading the Bible on a daily basis is SOAP, S-O-A-P. It stands for Scripture, which is another word for the Bible, observation, application, and prayer. Just means you read something in the Bible, you observe what it says, you brainstorm about how it might be applicable to your life, and then you pray. Reading and studying the Bible is key to executing spiritual discipline. The second one is communicating with God. And we all communicate in different ways. Some people journal, some people pray, some people have a blog, some people just talk out loud. That's cool. But here's the reality. Like, for me, my wife is a flight attendant, and so she's out of town a lot. So when she was gone, I had to learn new ways to communicate with her. And one night, it's like 1 a.m., I'm really tired, but I miss her, and I want her to know that I miss her. So I get up my cell phone, and I get ready to text her a message at like 1 a.m. Great idea, right? So I text her something like, hey, sweetie, hope you're having a great day. I miss you. And I was trying to like spice it up a little bit. So I think I said, I miss your hot body next to me. You guys were really uncomfortable right now, I can tell. So I go to sleep feeling good about myself. I was like, all right, my wife's going to feel desired. We're good. And then in the morning I wake up and I get a text from her and there's like 56 ha 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 ha's in all caps. And I'm like terrified, what happened? And she goes, please look at what you sent me. So I open it up and I said, I miss your hot boy next to me. Yowzas. So I tell you that because when you engage in a new form of communication or something new, there's going to be some road bumps. And for some of you, you don't talk to God on a consistent basis, and it's not going to feel supernatural when you start. But it's something that over the long haul, it's going to pour into the roots of your relationship with God. It's taking time in a quiet place to talk to God. Just be honest. Whether you want to journal or you just want to talk, it's just you and God. The third spiritual discipline I want to discuss is fasting. It's a churchy word. It's in the Bible a lot, and basically just means you're going to abstain from eating food so that you depend on God more. So that every time your stomach growls because you're starving, you pray. And it's a perfect example of something that's not inherently fun to do, but you do it because you trust and you see that God encourages us to do it. And you see that it makes us better over the long haul because we're increasing our dependency on Him. And the last one I want to talk about is if you don't hear anything else I say this morning, I want you to hear this. The fourth spiritual discipline, and the one that's key, and I think it's hardest for us, is isolation. Doing all these things I've talked about under the context of privacy and isolation. An intimate marriage would hardly exist if two people lived together only in social settings. A marriage wouldn't be healthy if all you did was hang out with friends and go out to eat and spend time with family, but didn't have any one-on-one time in your home. But that's what we do with God all the time. Some of you here come to church, which is great, and you're in a Bible study, which is awesome. But 100% of your relationship with God is in the context of social structures. It's in, hanging out. And God desperately desires to know you on a one-on-one basis. He desires to know you on a one-on-one basis in the private, real, authentic moments of your life when no one's around. We see Jesus did this in Mark chapter 1, verse 35. It says, before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Jesus set the tone. He set the example. When you go to God, don't just be reading something with Twitter up. I know I do it sometimes. And don't just make your relationship with God about coming to church and then going to a study and that's it. Solitude is the best context for study and prayer, where you go to God and say, God, you're going to be my focus for this duration of time. And my favorite part about solitude is that when you're isolated alone, it lets you know you're not a fraud. When you go to God alone, it lets you know you're not a fake. Because you're not trying to impress anybody. You're not even trying to impress God. You're just being real. Tell Him what you're going through, what you're thinking, and seeing what He might be communicating to you. And so these 4 things are things that you can implement starting today on Father's Day that would add depth and get rooted in your relationship with God. But the thing to remember is that it takes time. Jesus spoke in agricultural language because it takes time to experience this fruit. And so we've got to have patience. And one thing I want to hit on real quick, spiritual disciplines can easily become something that makes you feel better about yourself, and that's not the point. It can become something where you beat yourself up if you don't do it, and that's not the point. The point is to add depth and get rooted in Jesus and do things that isolate yourself so that you're with God one-on-one. But I think another major reason why God calls us to be rooted is like with that palm tree. If you don't have roots, you are going to get blown away when the storms of life come. Without private relationship with God, without having an intimate moment with God where it's just you and Him one-on-one, how can you expect to withstand the storms and the pain of this life without being rooted in Him? I want to show you a photo of my friend Kevin. He's one of my best friends. He was my team leader when I lived in Florida, and it's hard to describe, but he was the greatest leader I've ever been around. Just God was an integral part of everything he did. This guy oozed the fruit that we want: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, gentleness. He had it all. He was just this incredible, incredible guy. And I got to go visit him in December with his wife. They'd been married a couple months, and I'm in the car for like 5 minutes, and they tell me, we just found out we're pregnant like 6 hours ago. I was the first guy they told. I felt kind of cool, if you're the first one, you feel cool. And Kevin has always wanted to be a father. So to celebrate in that moment with him was just unbelievable. And so for the next couple of weeks, we just kept in touch. We talked, we emailed, everything was great. And then I got an email from Kevin and Lindsay, along one that they sent to a couple other people. There's some bad news. And I just want to read to you exactly what they wrote to me and some others. They said, "It's with deep sadness that we share this news. During our 20-week ultrasound, we discovered that our baby's upper half of the brain has not developed, nor has the skull. It's a condition called anencephaly. The brain should normally develop in the first few weeks of pregnancy. But the devastating news is that apart from God's hand, there is no cure. Because the brain has not developed, when the baby is born, she will die within seconds or hours after birth. We are both in great sorrow and mourning over this news, yet we are trusting in our great God and his goodness as we walk with him through this. We have many questions for the Lord, yet we are resting and clinging to his goodness. We know that God will be greatly glorified through our daughter's short life and want to step into grief in the season with the hope of heaven and how God will use our story to touch the lives of many around us and through us." On the last day I was in Florida with the Mosaic staff, I got to get breakfast with Kevin. And after crying together in a Starbucks for a while, I asked him a question that I think most of us would have asked, which is, "Kevin, how do you cling to God despite all this? How do you have peace about it?" And he looked at me like I was crazy. I felt stupid for asking the question after he looked at me. But he looked at me and said, "John, where else would I run to? Where else would I go?" He knew that nothing this world had to offer could possibly comfort him through likely the greatest pain he'll experience. Because he was rooted in Jesus, he was able to survive the fact that he was going to go through this pregnancy with his wife, knowing that simultaneously he had to plan a funeral and that there was a chance he may never hold her. But he was able to say that we are trusting in God's goodness. And I know some of you here are enduring pain. People at this church are going through a lot, I know. And some of you might be telling me, "John, I'm going through that right now and I can't take it. I don't think God's helping me." And if you're telling yourself that you can't take it, I'd agree with you. You can't. You can't take the pain. But the truth is that you don't have to, because Jesus already did. He took the pain. He lived a perfect life and suffered an unjustified death. And then he came back so that you would have a relationship with God and you could be rooted in something bigger than yourself. And being grounded to that truth is the only way you can handle the storms of life. So in a moment, we're going to remember that reality of what Jesus did when we take communion together. And the frontline team is going to pass out trays, and on that tray will be a stack of cups, one with a cracker representing Jesus' body, some juice representing Jesus' blood. And if you follow Jesus, I would encourage you in that moment to isolate yourself as best you can between you and God and no one else. Be honest with him and see what he might be communicating to you and see where he might be challenging you to pour into the roots, to pour into the unseen parts of your relationship with him that will produce the fruit you desire. The band earlier played a song where it says, "I'll love you after you're gone." And I think for some of you, that's really hard to think about the fact of loving God when you feel like he's abandoned you, or when you go through pain that you never thought you'd have to endure. But I think you can if you're poured into the roots, if you have a personal, intimate, deep relationship with God on a one-on-one basis. Because only then can you withstand the storm of your mother getting sick and there's no end in sight, or the storm of when your spouse looks you in the eye and says, "I don't love you anymore," or when you continue to try to just be a better person and you fail all the time, or when 20 weeks into your pregnancy you find out that your little girl is going to live for a couple minutes and that's it. When that happens, only by clinging to Jesus and digging deep can we withstand it. By pouring into the personal, one-on-one moments of our relationship with God when no one else is around, that's how we get the peace, the joy, and the goodness that we crave. Following Jesus does not mean your baby won't die, but it does mean that you can take it because you're clinging to Jesus, the one who can take it. Let's pray. God, I know that I am no perfect example of this. I know how difficult and how easily distracted we are in our culture to fit you into our schedule amid the Facebook, amid the Twitter, amid the TV. But Jesus, when I see that you want us to have fullness in life, I see that our roots are at the core of that, and that you want us in those intimate, private moments when it's just us and you. And Father, I know that there are people in incredible pain here. Show yourself to them, talk to them, and help them realize that only by clinging to you can they take it. You're the one that took the pain for us. Help us lean on you now. In Jesus' name, amen.